Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank God it is Friday. And if it's the beginning of your work week, then you can set on a Monday. But it's a holiday today, Veterans Day. So thank you for all your service, for all you veterans out there, whether it be in the United States or Israel or England, my three countries. They all have a different Veterans Day, so I'm not saying that's today. But thank you for your service for all of you who served in the United States military. So today is my Shabbat special. I always do for Friday nights. We continue with the biblical portion. We go through each week, and we're beginning with Genesis. So we've gone from Genesis. We talked about Noah. Last week was Lech Lecha, which was when Abraham left the land of his birthplace and went to the land of Israel. This week's Torah portion is called Vayera. And Vayera is a very interesting Torah portion. We have some very difficult events, difficult stories that take place, one of which is the Akedat Yitzchak, which is the when God tells Abraham to sacrifice his firstborn son, which seems kind of strange. Why would God ask that of someone? And people have been arguing about that and discussing the difficulty of that. Generations, it's used as an. It's like, I mean, what kind of God would ask that of somebody? But a lot of what we are learning about when we discuss Abraham, right? Abraham is the father of monotheism, and we came back, a few weeks ago we talked about Noah, and we said, well, why was Noah picked? Was Noah the most righteous person for his generation? He was the most righteous person for his generation, and the Torah, in fact, explained what was important about Noah. But the Torah does not do the same thing with Abraham. We're told where he comes from, that he comes from his father Terach. And then we are told that he left his home. We have some midrashic. We have some stories behind the famous story of him taking an anvil and taking a hammer and breaking the idols that his father had built. But we never really explained, other than through his actions, what was deserving of him to be considered the father of nations. The father of a multitude of nations. And then it comes to the whole question, what does that mean? What is the question of parenthood? So I put that as my topic, that Abraham in some ways represents what parenthood is all about. Now you may ask the question, well, Abraham didn't exactly treat Ishmael that well. I mean, Ishmael was kicked out. It was really God that saved Ishmael. It was not, Abraham did not, he was kind of led astray, so to speak. Or he had, and we see these continuing stories of jealousy and difficult familial relationships. So the real question is, so what is it about Abraham? And I think you can see a little bit of this in the text. So I'm going to read you a little bit from the text. This is from Genesis 18:17 to 19, verse 17-19. I'm going to paraphrase it. Then God said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham is about to become a great and mighty nation, and through him all the nations on earth will be blessed. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of God by doing what is right and just, and that God may bring about for Abraham what he spoke of for him." What does that mean? Right? So we've seen God is, first of all, is referring to himself in the third person. But what's interesting is Abraham is being referred to as father. This is the first time we've heard that spousal, that parental. The second time we've heard this parental explanation for what a leader is, as a father. The first time was Eve, Chava. Eve was the first named person in the Torah. Adam is just a word for human being, but Eve, the first woman, she was in the biblical story. She was named Chava. Which means she is the mother of all life. And we don't see any mention of fatherhood until for 20 generations, 10 from Adam to Noah, and then another 10 from Noah to Abraham. And the word Avraham means Av. It was originally Avram, which means mighty father, and it became Avraham. We changed it to father of a multitude of nations. So not just mighty father, but a father of a multitude of nations. And so the first interpretation of that is, well, really motherhood is way more important, as we know, but the emphasis on parenthood starts with the mother. And in Jewish spirituality, the mother, in its sense, is more important. The mother is more important. The names of God is considered, we say the word Avinu Malkeinu, Heavenly Father, or Father in heaven, our kingly Father in heaven. But within the names of God, we see El Rachum. The word El Rachum means God of mercy. Rachum comes from the Hebrew word Rechem, which means womb. So this is a feminine version of God. So the question is, so we understand motherhood, right? It's much easier, and we see this a lot. I'm not making a generalization, but we see that it's much easier for a man to abandon his children, and we see that so much in modern life, than it is for a woman. Women have that biological connection. Not that men don't have a biological connection through DNA, but it's almost like that there's a separation there. And that really is the key to understanding who Abraham is and the difference between motherhood and fatherhood. That fatherhood represents more of a separation, even though motherhood, there is a separation there as well. But what is key to understanding who Abraham is, and what we saw in that passage before, is that God, Abraham does challenge God, but God wants to hide from Abraham what he's about to do to Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a very interesting story on a side note, the Sodom and Gomorrah story. I talked about Ari Shafir, he does a wonderful story on the concept of Sodom and Gomorrah. So you want to go visit his channel and see that. I thought that was really funny. But the idea of Sodom and Gomorrah, we all know the story, is that God was going to destroy them because he didn't like the way they were behaving. And he went and at first he wanted to hide it from Abraham because I guess he knew Abraham was going to argue about it. But that's an expression about Abraham. And then we see the second verse, which makes no sense, the second big issue, and is, why would God tell Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, the one that he'd been trying for with his love, Sarah? He really wanted to have a son with him, and they went through all that process, and they had him in their old age, and then all of a sudden God is saying, take your son, your only son, the one you love, go to the land of Mount Moriah, and offer him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. What kind of God does that? Right? What kind of sense does that make? And so Rabbi Sachs brings in a very interesting explanation of that. That this is talking about the parent-child relationship. That, sometimes you've got to let your kids go. And anyway, all of us that are parents, and my youngest son is 20. My oldest son is Jake. You're 27. Same age I was when I came to America. And I got my middle kids, and they're 25, 24. My math is terrible. But, we have to have that separation for kids to become who they should really be. You cannot achieve your full potential until you have that certain separation. And that's what we see in the story of Abraham and Terach. That's why we spend so much time with Abraham talking about his father. That even though he rejected his father's lifestyle, his father was a fairly important person and was kind of the first person on that journey towards monotheism. But it took Abraham, because they traveled part of the way together, and then there was a separation. And then they continued to travel. Then Abraham traveled separately from his father. And so that's the key there, is that Abraham had to learn about his own identity by separating from his father, who was the idol, who built the idols, but was also, Terach didn't want to live where he was living, so he was a person that was searching, but Abraham took it to the next level. And it's the same way. Isaac couldn't be Isaac without that separation between Abraham and Isaac. So the separation, in a sense, obviously God is not asking Abraham to kill Isaac, But it was trying to teach Abraham that he needs to separate himself from his son Isaac. I mean, we saw that's the whole incident with Ishmael Hagar, right, where he sent Ishmael away. He sent one of his sons away. That was intentional, but the one that that was his favorite, he didn't send away. And that's an important distinction, an important idea that to understand that Abraham had to understand that concept of separation, that we can understand that concept of separation. And what Rabbi Sachs here says, and I'm going to read Rabbi Sachs. I've long argued that the point of the story is not that Abraham loved God enough to sacrifice his son, but that rather God was teaching Abraham that we do not own our children, however much we love them. The first human child was called Cain because his mother Eve said, with God's help, I have acquired kaniti, which means to acquire, to buy, a man. Right? He's acquired a son. When parents think that they own their child, the results is often tragic. We hear all those stories of, the idea of a helicopter parent where, everyone gets an award. That might be an example of that, where kids, you see these adult kids who just can't leave their family, their parental home. And unless you have that forced separation, it's a good thing. In Israel, kids are forced to go into the army. That creates a separation. You find that, someone who's 23 in Israel, or an American, so it's Veterans Day, someone that goes and joins the army at 18 has a greater maturity when they come out of the army or as they grow than someone of the same age. That's an argument for some kind of national service. It doesn't have to be in the military. It can be in the Peace Corps, but there has to be that kind of separation. You go off to college, you have that separation. It's that idea that you cannot become really your full potential. Abraham was the mighty father and became the mighty father of nations, but he had to separate from Terach in the same way that Isaac had to separate from his father. And so Isaac, the Torah, when they start talking about the stories of Isaac and Isaac, there's a separation there between Isaac and Abraham. Obviously, your father takes you somewhere because the God in his head told him to kill him. Well, he's gonna have some resentments there. You think he's gonna have some resentments there? I think so. But we have to first separate, then join. We become individuals. So once we become individuals as we get older, then we relate to our parents. We relate to our parents by becoming parents ourselves, by experiencing in our own way, going out into the real world and working. Rabbi Sachs brings some kind of questions here. In Jewish mysticism, it talks about, the nullification, bitzul hayesh, the nullification of the self. But that's not what it's really talking about. You have to understand who you are, and other religions talk about that idea where you kind of nullify yourself. But you have to understand who you are first before. What it really means is nullifying your ego, taking your ego out of sight of it, so you can really truly understand yourself. And I'm going to end this is my short discussion on Vayera, on Abraham, and this interesting story of what made him who I am. And I'm going to quote the Kotzker Rebbe. And Rabbi Sachs brought this in to kind of explain it, but I'm a big fan of the Kotzker Rebbe and a lot of the Hasidic, a lot of these kind of statements. And so this is a powerful statement. If I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you. So what does that mean? So that means that we have to have that separation. We have to have that separation, that initial separation, for me to understand who I am. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, right? There's a causality there, that we are who we are because of somebody else, then really I am not myself and I am not you. You have to individualize. And that's an essential aspect of Judaism. Of Abrahamic monotheism is the individual, is understanding the individual And so that you can then go out, and once you've nullified, you've understood yourself, then you can go out and help other people, right? So you look inward to then go outward. We talked about this last week, that Abraham was the outward leader, but he had to learn that. We all have to learn that. And I want to end with Rabbi Sachs, who says, beautiful, based on that last kotzka, he says, God loves us as a parent loves a child. But a parent who truly loves their child makes space for the child to develop their own identity. It is the space we create for one another that allows love to be like sunlight to a flower, not like a tree to the plants to grow beneath, right? The plants put beneath rely upon the tree, but the sun is independent of the flower. The role of love, human and divine, is, in the lovely phrase of Irish poet John O'Donoghue, to bless the space between us, that personal space that makes us unique, but then we come together as a community. And I've been reading a book by the Dalai Lama, and so with that, I want a little teaser there, and I think that there's a similarity between Buddhism and Judaism in this concept, and I want to talk about that a little bit next Tuesday when I do my weekly kind of news weekend roundup type show, where I talk about some politics, but I also want to talk about the Dalai Lama and his idea of spirituality in the broader sense. This is an interfaith. I like to get beyond Judaism. I think Judaism is just one aspect. So with that, I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom, and I hope you have a lovely weekend, a beautiful weekend. If you observe Shabbat, whatever day of the week is your Shabbat, is your Sabbath, I hope you have a beautiful one, and live long and prosper, and please be good to each other. Take care. Bye.